You got your first real taste of the streamer world by fighting with my good friend Joe in the back.
I did get my first real taste of the streamer world as a participant. I've seen enough of it that I had some basic sense.
Before we,
I'm a little. No, just kidding. I just think it's like I do love the handle because like you either have logic. You can have bad logic because it's not correct, but then it's not. Bad logic is not logic.
Yeah,
So,
to be fair, I don't know if you noticed this online, but basically everybody that has like rational or logic or truth or veritas or whatever, all of these are like far right conservative people. But what are you gonna do? Sorry, my brain is still recovering from all the high level ideas. So we're interviewing a bunch of people that are running for the DNC chair, and you are one of the more, I'll say, outer perimeter candidates. Do you want to introduce yourselves? Who are you? Why should people care about who you are?
absolutely. Well, I'll start with. I did want to make an announcement that while I am one of the outer perimeter candidates, as of yesterday, I am an official candidate. I am one of the candidates who will be in the 4 forums, which are the official DNC. They're really debates, but they're called forums because they're not supposed to be combative. I am one of the 8 candidates who have made that. This is the first time I'm saying that publicly. So
Awesome.
I'm excited about that. And that it sort of means that, you know, I'm on the periphery only for a little bit longer. So I'm excited about that.
Congratulations.
So I think you sort of asked me the James Stockdale question. And for those of you who don't know, it's a little before in 1992, he was the Ross Perot's running mate. And he showed up at the VP debate, and it's like, who am I and why am I here? And people's basic attitude is, yeah, we the end of that speech, we didn't know either. So, but for me, really, I'll start with sort of who I am, and then sort of what I want to bring to the race, and then sort of then I'll get an answer question. So, you know, this started for me, amazing enough, when I was in high school. And I know this for sure because in my high school yearbook, the teacher whose job it was to do prophecies said that I would be the DNC chair. That was the prophecy for me in my high school yearbook.
What an oddly specific claim to make. Okay.
That was the claim. You mean, but that wasn't me. That was
or not claim, her prediction. That's just such a weird thing to predict somebody.
Well, it's very
like
clear.
You're going to be the secretary of the department of the. Yeah, it's just very funny. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, because I was so like Democrat-y, I probably missed more days of school doing campaign stuff than I missed in my entire 4 years of high school. And my senior project was about the campaign I was an intern for in between junior and senior year in college. And then I was worried we were going to run again. And I was concerned because it was going from a presidential to a midterm. And I was like, if we run again, I'm really worried about it. And nervous we were going to lose. And then we ended up losing. And so that is how I've been in this for that long. And then really, so that is sort of how I got started. But I've been in this fight for democratic values and democratic campaigns consecutively for the last 20 years. It really is an issue for me of sort of, you'd have to do exclusion before you do inclusion in terms of what I've done.
Sure.
I was a candidate for state representative. I managed a statewide campaign, endless municipal campaigns. I was the high school Democratic liaison, was my college Dems president. We got a bunch of people to New Hampshire for Obama. Then sort of going on from there, more recently, I managed one of the offices for Yes on One, where in Massachusetts, we raise taxes on those making more than $1 million a year. And that has led to public education and transportation. There are kids eating school lunches today because we won that race. And while I've been doing that, I've been thinking about how this stuff can be better, because a lot of the times I've watched it go along and people have been very wedded to doing things the way they've always done them. And I don't think that we can do that and be happy at all with the results. The thing that jumps out at me is that it is, we came close-ish to winning the presidential election, but there were 24 states that we lost by 10 points or more. We have no senators from there. We have 2 governors from there. And I think they're both about to be termed out. And so in those 24 states, things are going really poorly. And if you continue that level of poor performance in those states, then you're giving up 48 Senate seats by default. You're basically saying, yes, we can win elections, but we can never do any of the things we want to do to govern. And if we can never do anything of the things we want to do when we govern, then we're going to lose more elections because people are going to be disappointed that we can't do the things that they voted us to do.
What goes into the decision? So you've done a lot of like campaign management behind the scenes. What goes into the decision to like run for a chair versus like working on a campaign?
Well, basically, I'm running for chair because there are a lot of bold ideas that I want to introduce into this Democratic Party process because the party needs to change and be better. And so it's when you're under the gun, under the clock of we're trying to win a campaign now, you're never going to slow down to be like, wait, can we do this? Is there something we can do better? Because if we don't do what we need to do now, then we're going to lose. And so you can never make those broad improvements. I'm in this race because to my mind, there are 20 million people who are Democrats. And when I say that, those are the people who, the way I come to that number is, those are the people who either voted for Joe Biden or another candidate in our most recent low turnout presidential primary, or they're one of the 15 million people who have their credit card saved on ActBlue. Those 2 groups together would be 31 million. There's 10 million in crossover. So that gets you to 21. And I say 20 because 20 is nicer than 21.
Okay.
And I want to speak for them as part of this process because to be a Democrat needs to be easier. It needs to be more fun. And it needs to be less based on scaring people to sort of death about, give now, do this now, using false urgency to scare people is how that works. The people we need to get those 20 million people excited about being Democrats again. And we can only do that if we change how the mechanics of that work. And so sort of the other thing, as watched you, the 2 candidates yesterday, and I feel like this audience would benefit from sort of explaining both how this whole DNC process works, because I came away from that somewhat mystified as to how this works. And so with your permission, I wanted to.
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, I guess my understanding is actually, even my understanding is somewhat limited. There's 448 DNC members that are going to be voting on effectively who will be the chair. The chair gets to nominate 75 of these members, I guess, once they become the chair. I actually, other than that, I'm not sure how the individual DNC members themselves are appointed or.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So basically, the DNC. So the members are appointed. You have 4 from every state and state-like entity, which includes, there's one from the Northern Marianas Islands and Guam and Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia and Democrats abroad. So there are 4 people chosen by each state has at least 4, then a bunch of other states have slightly more, somewhat based on population, but also based on Democratic performance. So Massachusetts and Tennessee have the same population. Massachusetts has 1 more DNC member. So that's the bulk of how people are chosen. Each state chooses its DNC members in different ways. Some choose them at their state conventions. Some choose them by members of the state executive committees. I know my state, I know Connecticut. I don't really know all of the other states, but that's how the bulk of them are chosen. Then there's the 75 who are appointed by the chair, but confirmed by the body at large. So it's not a fait accompli, but nobody really ever challenges those. And then there's another group that comes from the Democratic affiliates. So there's the Young Dems have 3, high school Dems have 2, college Dems have 2, the governors have 4, the the governors have 3, the congressional representatives have 4, the mayors have 3, the municipal offices have 3, the Federation of Democratic Women have 3, And so when you put all of those people together, all elected slightly differently, they get chosen that way. And most of the time, the way the DNC works is most of the time, the DNC is an appendage of the White House when we're in power. And so they're the rubberist, become the rubberist of rubber stamps because the money that they get comes from the White House fundraising operation. So when there isn't a White House, that's when it becomes a more interesting conversation. But that is sort of the process, and those people get to choose and how much input those people want from the 20 million Democrats. Some people want a lot, some people want a little, some basically are, I'll take it from here.
What do you think when you're looking at the way that the last race went, and you're looking at like strategies when it comes to approaching the body of the American population? How do you feel when it comes to trying to pull in more of your base, trying to aim at more of like these kind of like center people, trying to maybe pull some people from the conservative side? What do you think are like big strategy changes that the Democratic Party should be making when it comes to appealing to, these people?
So I think that that's really understandable, and I'm going to get to that. But for me, what's really important is a lot of these are how mechanic questions.
Okay.
So that it's getting a voter, sort of, how do we gain a voter's attention? Because to me, the clear thing is the biggest divide of who voted for us and who didn't is if you pay a lot of attention, you voted for Harris. If you pay less attention, you voted for Trump. That's not uniformly true, but it's enough true that that is a huge dividing line. And the question is, what are the things you have to do to gain attention, and what new things do you have to do to gain attention that are not the things that traditionally are done, which is we're going to flood the zone with television ads. About 70% of our budget goes to television ads. We then say, oh, well, we're going to do the television ads, but we need to do digital. So then we basically take the kinds of ads that you put up on television and put them on the internet. And now we've done digital. And then the rest is sort of, traditional field work, which is we're going to knock on your door. And part of the problem is all of that is so in send mode that it's just more noise. So what are the things that we can do as a party to sort of cut through so that it's not just more noise? And then you get to sort of, my goal in being here is to lay out sort of the hows. And then once you sort of cut through the hows, then I would definitely love to go through the sort of what are the messaging problems. But what I say on messaging is so many people, when they want to talk about a message, it's like your song. So you want your song to be great. But if your song is heard through lousy speakers, if your song is heard with a barking dog over it, if the person, when they're listening to your song, just got into a fight with their significant other, doesn't matter how good your song is. And sort of being obsessed with, we got to get everything right about, messaging the song perfectly and spend no time on sort of the speakers, I think is really important. So the story I want to tell about this is sort of how I got the 40 signatures I needed to make the forum. Because how I went about doing that, both I did some of the things I don't particularly love, but it will also show sort of the things I heard about from the DNC members, where I think that why the way that they were thinking sort of needs somewhat of a course correction through doing that. So these members had the ability to sign, to put me on the forum. They could sign any number of petitions they wanted. If you was unable to sign more than one petition, I wouldn't have run because I would not have been able to get into the forums. If people don't hear me, my resume doesn't rack. Yesterday you had a 2-term mayor and 2-term governor. So on a resume basis, I had no chance. But the way I did this was, okay, I'm going to explain the ideas that I thought were best. I emailed them a lot. I was probably emailing like once and up to twice a day. That's amazing to me was
When you say them, do you mean all like
all 404,
40
448 members of the DNC that were available? About half of them listed phone numbers. I probably called about 75% of them.
Okay.
And then I Facebook friended a lot of the ones who accepted it, because then I could Facebook friend them and send the link, and then was available to talk. I got some signatures that way. Some people, but I'm interested in sort of the way. So I was very aggressive, and I was on this deadline. That was amazing to me, is that they told me on December 23rd that I needed to have the signatures by January 2nd to qualify for the first forum. That's a terrible time to do this, obviously. And then because they moved the date of the first forum because of the death of President Carter, they then extended it to the 4th. I got it on the 4th. But I was really aggressive in my emailing, and sort of some of the fun things that, there were a number of wonderful, totally gracious people. But sort of probably my favorite story is there was a member from a really deep red state who I was having a good conversation with. And then I talked with them about how, they said, oh, we haven't decided yet. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. We shouldn't pick the assistant coach after the team loses. We shouldn't just automatically give it to the assistant coach, because if we just do that. And then I heard feedback from my team said that he didn't want to sign for me because I was too negative and I wasn't focusing on all the good things that done. And speaking as one of the 20 million ordinary Democrats, I don't know. I'm happy we won some of the races we won. I don't feel a lot of good happened. So I'm not sort of in a position where if you want to hear about all the good things we did, I'm not the guy for you. Someone else said that my ideas were deeply were unserious, and that's why he would not sign for me. And I think that believing that we can do what we've always done is the truly unserious thing, because what we've done has resulted in the result that we've got. And the result that we've got, one, we lost and we face Trumpian apocalypse, but also for 24 states, we're not in the conversation.
Just curious, on the pushback that you got on the emails, what were like the ideas that people pushed back against the most? They were the most unserious?
Nobody pushed back on any ideas specifically.
Okay.
The guy just said, you're unserious, talk to DNC members, and they'll tell you how you can be super serious. Okay. So I'll start with, now I'm going to try. So that was the process. It was a really good process. I worked really hard, but I sent too many people too much stuff, I felt. But one of the things is, like the people who do it on the fundraising side, every time I sent an email, a little something good happened. So every time they send an email, they get some money. The fact that the people who they may have annoyed in the process didn't matter to them writ large, but does matter all the time. And so the sort of biggest idea that I had, that I started off with, is that the Democratic Party needs to, quote, and I said, stop the damn texts. The way that the Democratic Party's constant text messaging of asking people for money in fake urgency, lying ways is a huge problem to people wanting to be involved in this system. And as I was sitting getting ready for this, I got a new text message from an institution that said, Joe Manchin just introduced Supreme Court term limits. One little problem with that. Joe Manchin is no longer a sitting United States senator. So that level of sort of we're the lying to people about there are laws we can pass, there's things we can do. Everything is, if you give us $5, we will be able to solve all your problems, makes it really unfun to sort of be a Democrat. And one of the things a lot of the DNC members told me was, but those are outside groups. And that's not the DNC. The DNC doesn't do that. The DNC is better. You can't blame us for that. And the truth is, I don't blame you for that. You're not at fault. But so if you're on Facebook and someone creates a spoof account of you, you often tell your friends, this is a spoof account, don't friend it. And then you tell Facebook, take it down. Well, when Democrats, for whatever, send a parade of lying text messages to the phones of these 20 million people, telling them these lies and putting, basically, particularly after the election, when everybody needs a breath, because there's nothing that can be accomplished in the next 6 months for Democrats in that vein. They were telling me to sign a Kamala Harris thank you card the day of, because they needed to keep, the day after the election, sign a Kamala Harris card because they needed to keep their fundraising churning thing going. And I found it to be assaultive. I don't think we need to I don't think that we need those texts to successfully raise money. And I think that what it does is make it exceedingly challenging. It's a thing you want to tune out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we want to be people that people want to tune out. So that's sort of thing one in my proposals. Sort of one, there are lots of little political, logistical details about there's this group, there's that group, it all works. And I'm not going to don't really want to get into that here, because at the end of the day, it's our job as a party to figure out how to make it easier and make the user experience better for the people who are our party. It's not our job to throw up our hands and say there's nothing we can do. And, it's one of the leading critics of people who are harsh on this was like, well, if there's a decent way to police them, it's probably through Act Blue. We can police them through Act Blue. And they're like, but if they're not on Act Blue, then they'll just go somewhere else and we'll be less able to control them. And my response to that is, if it is the case, Act Blue is like a credit card company at this point. If you are a business and you can't take a regular credit card, the red flag that sends about what business you are is so great that will destroy 90 to 95% of your business if you're not able to use the credit card system. If you're not able to use Act Blue, it's the exact same level of yes, yes, a scammer could say Venmo me, a scammer could say send me Bitcoin, but the number of people who then that next step is, well, that's no.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
you already lost a huge percentage.
You've already lost a huge percentage. And the point is that since you're not getting, like, if you successfully scam someone Nigerian Prince style, you get, $10,000, it's worth doing it. If you're scamming someone for $5, you're not going to scam anybody for $5 that much, because you can't scam enough people to make it worth the effort. And so it's our job to user-face fix that.
Okay.
So that's one of my big proposals. The second is, and again, it involves fixing the internal logistics, which are hard, but which the people who are watching this don't care about. We need to go to a subscription model for funding the party. If you currently, the fact that you have so many different entities competing with each other to raise money means that the Democratic Party, a lot of what it does is compete against itself to raise money. You have 50 different Senate candidates. Sometimes you have state parties now leaving their state boundaries. The idea that you'd ever raise money for the Wisconsin Democrats outside of Wisconsin was unheard of. Now it's commonplace. They're the most important critical swing state. It totally makes sense.
I heard that when we did canvassing in Georgia for the Senate runoff races for Ossoff and Warnock, and I think I want to say I heard it was like over $1 billion of funding, and so much of it obviously external was poured into that state for those two Senate races because everybody was interested in them. Yeah, it seems like a lot of the swing states have become targets for like external fundraising, even when it comes to like Supreme Court races, like state Supreme Court races, or governor races and whatnot. Yeah.
Right. I mean, all of that is. I mean, we're not going to end all of that overnight. Mm-hmm. But basically to me is, if you become someone who says Democrats are important to me, winning is important to me, I want to do a subscription. I want to do $10 a month to where it will do the most good. I want you to figure out where it will do the most good. And I then want to be done being asked for money. if we can get enough people to do that, we can fund all of the things that we want to fund. And more importantly, some of the things that we want to fund actually have more of an impact on the lives of the people who are contributing the money, because right now, a lot of what you contribute to is you're going to buy a bunch of ads in one of the core 7 swing states. I would probably also throw in the 2 Senate races in Ohio and Montana. Those are the 9 states that get all the money, got all the attention. Everybody else got sort of peanuts. And so if you make it something that you can sort of do more things. So the big, bold, really expensive thing I want to do, or a lot of them, but the one I'm focusing on right now is we need 10,000 paid organizers who get real living wage jobs that make them above the median income in their area. We need them we need one for every single county and one for 50,000 of population outside. Once your county is bigger than 50,000, LA County can't have one organizer. LA County is bigger than like 30 states.
Just curious, what is the, how many people are employed by the DNC right now? Do you know that number? Is that even public? Or I have no idea how large or expansive the organization is in terms of people
I think that probably the DNC on a regular basis is about 100 employees.
Oh, geez. Okay.
But those are like the full timers.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of contractors.
There's a lot of, then they probably staffed up to 1,000 once it becomes, during presidential cycles. But I want to be clear, when I say 10,000 organizers, I'm not that are employed by the DNC. Mm-hmm. The logistics of which alphabet soup they're funded by and how that alphabet soup works, again, internal logistical problems that I have decent ideas of how to fix, but it's what we need to win. And if it's what we need to win, we need to figure out how to get it if we need it to win. And then we'll figure out all the logistics on the back end. We need that because I was listening really intently yesterday, the degree to which the Democratic Party functions like startups. They come up, they build it up, they create a new staff, they create a new thing, they tear it down. They build it up, they tear it down, they build it up, they tear it down. And they tear it up and build it down with people not from the places that they're working. Mm-hmm. That model is we spend at least 25% of our time building and destroying, building and destroying, building and destroying. We do it because we think that there is a deep scarcity in the amount of resources that exist for the party. Because almost all of the people who got started in the party started when there was an absolute scarcity of resources, of the money available because nobody the number of people who donated was in the tens of thousands, maybe at the outside 100,000s. Now there are 15 million saved credit cards on ActBlue. So there are enough people to break the scarcity model. It's just the people aren't the people who are the DNC are so wedded to the scarcity model that they think that. So what I'm talking about, roughly speaking, costs $1 billion a year. Jason, that's an incredible amount of money. How are you going to raise $1 billion a year? Well, one, you now have a person who is available to you who is around not 24, but is around you 365 days a year, who lives in your county, who is the Democratic Party, so they can ask you. And then you also, the Democratic members of Congress in the House ended the cycle with $243 million of cash on hand that they did not spend collectively. A lot of that is Democrats in safe races who think that they could use the money for a rainy day. Totally understand it. I want to be very clear, I'm not being critical of the decisions that were made in the past. There's no point to that. But going forward, Congressman Ellison, now Attorney General Ellison, he was then Congressman Ellison from Minnesota, his district in the Minnesota 5th, he poured incredible amounts of money into these kinds of organizers. And because he poured this kind of money into these organizers, in 2010, we saved the Minnesota governorship by about 10,000 votes because we saved the Minnesota governorship by 10,000 votes, Minnesota didn't go the way of Wisconsin. And to this day, the Minneapolis turnout is way better than the Milwaukee turnout. Now, are there other demographic reasons for that? Is it just this program? It's not just this program, but it's a lot this program. And he really dedicated to doing this organizing. And we don't push our members of Congress to do that because it's a mechanical thing that we don't understand. But they could, if you took, if they ponied up $100 million collectively for this, that is a huge down payment on the $1 billion a year that we need. And they have it. And maybe if the ones who are not raising like that, to some degree, if you're a Democrat in a safe Democrat in Congress, a lot of what you could do is be work and party building. Because when you're in Congress now, really, you just are there to mostly vote no. There's not a lot of good law stuff that you could be doing. And if only you did this bill or that bill, like you want to feel like all these what's going on in Congress is the most important thing. But if any of the public paid the slightest attention to what was going on in Congress, the epic dysfunction of the last Congress would have had a real role in this election. The dysfunction of Congress had absolutely no role in this election. Now, it's true the Democrats probably didn't highlight it as much as I would have, but it's very hard to break through that, like, Republicans have absolutely no, they have no idea how they're going to get any laws. And they have a 2-seat majority. How are they going to pass laws? When they were in the majority last time, they had 2 years and they passed no laws.
And they couldn't even hold on to their
They couldn't
speaker
keep
seat.
they couldn't keep the speaker. They couldn't keep the same speaker. And then they, basically they now have a speaker by exhaustion. They don't want Mike Johnson. They never wanted Mike Johnson. Some people didn't want Jim Jordan. Some people didn't want Steve Scalise. Some people didn't want. And then basically Mike Johnson got chosen speaker because we're literally tired of doing this. It was literally 3 days of exhaustion, and he was chosen by exhaustion, and now he stays by exhaustion. And so dysfunction if you're a Democratic member of Congress, there's not a lot going on in Congress. You could be a party organizer with the money that you have. You should do that. And sort of collectively you get that, once you have those people in place, those 10,000 people in place, it's really want to be very clear. They have 2-year commitments. They're from the county in which they are hired. And they're not necessarily the same people that were doing these jobs before, because to me, a huge important thing that we need to do is in the counties that we lose 2-1 or more, do the people even know a Democrat that they like personally? Do they even know one Democrat who they're like, I like Joe, I like Jenny, I like Joe and Jenny. Joe and Jenny are good people. When they talk about Democrats on Fox, surely they don't mean Joe and Jenny. Joe and Jenny are nice. But in a lot of those places, they don't know Joe and Jenny. And it's true that they could know Joe and Jenny, but Joe and Jenny are quiet because if you live in a place that is bad, people don't want to, social pressure is really hard. You don't want to speak up because first you don't want to speak up, and then you don't want to have contrarian views, and then you're a Republican because you live in a county that is 2-1 Republican. Then it starts as 2-1, then it becomes 75-25 because being in the minority stinks, particularly. But one of the social science experiments that they always did was that if you did an experiment where if you were in a classroom and you were with a bunch of Confederates and they were telling you that the line was way wrong. The line was wrong. The line was not equal. You said they were equal. If everybody says that you're equal, then a huge number of people say, if everybody else says it, then I'm going to say it. You get one dissenter, and the number of people who then say, wait a minute, that's not right, skyrockets. In a lot of places, we don't even have that one dissenter. And the 10,000 organizers are a good start to making sure that we have that one dissenter.
What do you envision these 10,000 organizers doing? Like, what would their primary role or job be, I guess?
So their primary job, this is it's a little complicated because now I'm about to spend a bunch more money. But to me, their primary job is I would like to see 1 million people engaging in the work of talking to about 200 neighbors apiece. And so if you get, and then you need those organizers to keep those people relatively happy and on task. But more important than, so that's one thing I would want them to do. Another thing I just want them to do is be available as resources to, I was thinking about like, some of Martin O'Malley was also like, we need to include the input of the mayors and we need to include the input of all these local people who are doing tremendous work. And they are doing tremendous work. But if you're a Democratic mayor and you're going about the business of running your city is exceptionally hard. That's a really hard job. And then also making sure that the voters like you so that they keep you as their mayor is incredibly hard. If you have something you want to contribute to the party, that's already a big ask because there's so little time. But let's say you want to do that. Who do you talk to? Who is it that's available to you that can say, oh, I've been hearing in my town that we really need X. Please help us get X. If we get
Does
X.
Does anybody really need X?
Does that what?
It was a Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
So, mess with you. I know what you were saying.
It's a specific thing.
Yeah.
No one needs X. And my campaign is actually not on X because when it is the case that you have a platform that is built entirely to destroy you, it is not the idea that you can go to a place where you are the Washington Generals and people will respect you as the Washington Generals is not. No one respects the Washington Generals. They always lose.
Yeah.
And to some degree, the algorithms on X now guarantee that you're going to lose. I'm not denigrating anyone who is, but for me, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be a place. So the answer is nobody needs X. If ultimately, a place like that, if it become, the difference between, if X is Gab or X, I don't even remember how many of those other things there are. But at some point, if normcore humans leave a platform, the platform dies. So participation by you as a normcore human in keeping the platform afloat, mostly because of incumbent effects, you're probably not helping.
Sure.
But that's a big.
I understand.
That's a big conversation, but.
So so it makes sense that
so like just having a human that you can talk to, his job. If any Democrat who wants someone whose full-time job it is to help them, you just even if it's just here's my full-time job is to help you, members of the Democratic City Committee in my hometown of Newton. Newton would probably qualify for its own staffer under this. The city committee that I'm on that has incredibly good ideas. The people almost no one is full-time on this. So if you can't do, it's really, I'd say the major thing for me is having ideas that will never be accomplished means that you stop having ideas. And being sort of the reason I'm in this is that if in the Democratic Party, there's no way to advance by having good ideas, then nobody's going to have good ideas. We've all collectively stopped thinking about how things could be done differently because we've already pre-feasibled that it can't be done. We've talked ourselves out of its feasibility. And by doing that, we've talked ourselves into an unceasing minority in 24 states. And that the damage of that, and this is, sort of a broader aside, but everyone always tells me there's so much money in politics. There's so much money in politics. Why is there so much money in politics? And I'm a contrarian. There's nowhere near enough money in politics because this cycle, the Democrats all in spent about $7 billion. Control of the federal government at a minimum is worth $250 billion a year in terms of what you can do for editing budget priorities, for choosing different things, for all of that. Realistically, when you throw in regulation and you throw in all the other things, control of the federal government writ large is worth $1 trillion a year. spending $7 billion to take over a $1 trillion company would be laughed at. The amount of money you would spend to take over $1 trillion company would be in the $100 billion range for that attempt. Now, I'm not saying, oh, well, we should make politics an auction. We should not make politics an auction. That's bad. But it seems like it's so much money is spent because the way it is spent is we're going to run television ads in 7 states. If the question is there so much money in politics, we're going to run television ads in 7 states, then yes, you don't need another huge amount of money. Doubling the number of television ads that the Harris-Walz campaign ran in those 7 states would have changed very few minds and definitely no outcomes. But we have too little money in politics because what's at stake is so huge and how we go about spending it is so small. But to convince the 15 million people that I'm talking about that they want to, up their game in terms of donating, it has to be for stuff that is not $1 billion in television ads in states you don't live in. Because would you want to fund television ads in 7 states you don't live in? Like, that's what you're doing? I mean, I do it because I want to win, and winning is important to me, but doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And as I said at the top, more fun, easier, and less obnoxious. If you can be more fun, easier, and less obnoxious, what I'm talking about for each person is the cost of a Costco membership. It's not like I'm asking you to, as one of my 20 million Democrats, unload your bank account, mortgage your children's future, and and never eat out ever again. I'm asking, buy a Costco membership. They took, collectively Costco in their membership fees takes in $4.5 billion a year. That's probably both internationally and in the States. But the point remains, you can afford a Costco membership, but you have to get the cool stuff that Costco gives you. I'm totally cool with my organizer in their office. Let's run it out with loss leader hot dogs. So loss leader hot dogs at every Democratic Party office.
Sure.
Probably need some vegan options too, because we are Democrats.
Yeah. What do you think that if you were to get the DNC chair position, how hard or difficult do you think it would be to implement these kinds of things? Like, do you think if you won the seat, do you feel like people would be excited to go along with this? Or do you think there'd be a lot of friction? Or
I think that there definitely would be friction. It's not an easy task. But what I would say is that the people that we need to convince of this is not the DNC membership writ large. Though to be elected chair, I need to convince them. So that's a cart before the horse issue. But it starts with convincing the major donors that they can't sort of do this what amounts to on the cheap for them. I'm not calling out any particular names. That's not my bag. But you basically have a situation where I want to give to the Democratic Party. I give the $1 million I can legally do through all the, you give to, and the way that works is you give to the DNC and then you give to all the state parties and then you give to Harris-Walz thing and then logistical nonsense. This is not, your audience is not going to have huge interest in all this esoterica. But basically, I don't want to fund organizers in states we have no chance to win, because that's a waste of money. But what I think very strongly is sending a signal to the country that only these 7 states matter, only this matters, it only matters, all we ever want from you is your vote. There's a sort of pop culture reference. I don't know if people saw this, but like The Candidate was a show on Netflix that with Ben Platt from Dear Evan Hansen, and he's the star, and there's a campaign, and there's this kid who nobody ever pays attention to, and then it's election day, and all of a sudden it's an incredibly close election, and everybody starts paying attention to him, and it's like he's important for one day. But in the end, he doesn't even vote, because if you don't feel important all the time, then when they think you're important, it seems like a put on. And it doesn't seem important. It seems like it's important to you, but how could it possibly be important to me? It was also a school election, so it wasn't important to him. But to the Democrats in places that were not winning, to leave them to their devices is just not good. You have to convince the major donors that they have to pony up slightly more because the party can't be successful if we're leaving so many people behind. So there will be lots of, that is the struggle. I would say that it's not, getting these ideas implemented is not a question of whether they make a relatively unknown outsider DNC chair. And if they do that, then we can get this stuff. But if they don't do that, they can't get this stuff. They can get this stuff if they decide that they need this stuff and we need this stuff to win. Since my ideas were really hard and really expensive, I want to go for one that is really easy, really economical, and strikes me as being incredibly important. So in 2026, everybody's going to want to take back the House. We know with absolute certainty, like there are 25 districts where Trump won by 11 or less. And
it's a lot of points.
No,
11
is the highest reach. A lot of them.
Yeah, are within more, yeah.
And some of them we won. It was 11, so some of them were ones that we won.
Oh, okay.
So it's the two that we won plus the ones we lost by like a point or 2 points.
Gotcha.
It's 11 and less.
Okay, gotcha.
And so in those 25 seats, we need to create the nominee funds, already totally legal through Act Blue. It was done in the Susan Collins race back in 2020, originally to try and bully her into not voting for Kavanaugh, and then the money was there when she voted for Kavanaugh. But you can do nominee funds are already done. We need to provide $2 million in nominee fund money to raise it for those districts. Already starting now, we can do it beforehand. The reason we need to do that is we need to get candidates in those districts for whom their number one skill is not necessarily raising money. Too often, the way that the party selects candidates is prove you can raise money and then we love you. But the problem is prove you can raise money, then we love you, is there are sort of three kinds of people who can do that. One, people whose existing networks makes getting money from them exceptionally easy. They have really rich friends. Two, people who are in elected office who people want to curry favor for and everybody knows them and then they can raise money, okay. And three, people who begin the process of learning really well how to ingratiate oneself with the richest people by telling them what they want to hear. Someone who is good at call time, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but call time is they throw you in a room and they say, you're calling rich people.
To try to
and you're calling rich people to raise money and you're doing that. And, it was on The Wire. So it's Carcetti hated it, but then he got good at it. Getting good at it may seem good, but the kind of person who is good at call time is the kind of person who has slowly lost connection with an ordinary, regular working person because, and now you have the exceptional, gifted Barack Obamas and Bill Clintons who can transition and do both. But for the most part, as you spend all that time with people who have lots of money, it becomes harder to connect with ordinary people. It's harder to get sort of, one candidate I love this cycle who didn't win but came really close and hope she'll run again is Rebecca Cook in Wisconsin. And sort of she's, when she's not running for Congress, she's a waitress and runs a nonprofit. And, there were some donor types who were like, oh, those are not real jobs. Why aren't you why aren't you a big time lawyer? And the bottom line is you can't, people who are good at, I would much rather have candidates who are good at relating to ordinary people and then teach them to raise money, or don't teach them to raise money and just give them the money than trying to do it the other way. Because trying to teach people who are really good at conversing with their wealthy friends are not to be more relatable, you know. So like I hate this story and I love this story all at the same time. In Iowa in 2014, our candidate was Bruce Braley, who was a congressman. He was raising money from lawyers, and he said, I need to get elected to the Senate because if I'm elected to the Senate, Chuck Grassley, the senior senator from Iowa, will not be chair of the Judiciary Committee because we can't have someone who's not a lawyer be chair of the Judiciary Committee. That was raising money faux pas. And I think that faux pas alone started Iowa down the bad trend that it did. When you look at all of the some of the great gaffes of political history, Barack Obama's "you cling to your guns and religion," donors. Mitt Romney's 47% comment, donors. When politicians are talking to donors, it makes them less relatable to the average person. The amount I'm talking about is $50 million. There are 15 million credit cards saved on ActBlue. The math is like $10 a piece is 3 times what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So that's very the stuff I'm suggesting otherwise. I really want to do it. I think it's essential. I understand how turning a giant ship around is really hard. This one is something we can do easily that does not require moving the ship around. It just changes the mindset because the mindset of you raise, then we'll talk is dumb when there are only 25 races. It can't be you raise and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
It's we need you to run a good campaign. We need you to win collectively. So we need to fund you regardless. And, all the institutions were set up when that was not the case. I mean, almost all the Democrats in the House were set up until 1994. Democrats never lost the House, except for from 32 on, the Democrats lost the House twice until 1994. So when you think that you're going to be in the majority forever, you set up institutions that say, you need us way more than we need you. Now we need you way more than you need us. And the institutions have changed a lot. I was in an energy trip. I'm not trying to say they're still in the 1994 mindset. Mm-hmm. But some of the thinking is still like that. And that has to change. So that's an easy one.
When you're going into like these forum debates now that you've gotten into coming up, and you're trying to talk to both DNC voters, like the people that are doing the vote, and then even like ordinary, I guess, Democrats who are listening, what do you think is your, your plea or the thing to capture their attention the most? I happen to agree with you that I think that there are some big changes that need to happen, but it's always so scary. Like people would sometimes rather like slowly sink than like do something big to right the ship. Yeah. What's your plea to kind of convince somebody like we should try something significantly different?
I mean, my plea is that you can't possibly like the outcomes. If you can't possibly think that it's little tweaks that are needed, both of the other candidates who are here today agreed with that. I'm more than happy to get into they talked about the messaging. That is where I'm happy to go with next. But to me, sort of it's getting all those hows right. It's not working. And the thing I would say is it's not working because it's not human. I think that, sort of bringing back empathy to all that we do is so important when it comes to this. Because, a vignette from my time, I drove up to Buffalo, New York, for the special election for now Governor Hochul, then Congresswoman Hochul. And I was, knocking on doors, and that was fun. But there also, the DCCC was making calls. And some of the staffers were laughing because the voters were complaining about how many calls they got. And the staffers were laughing, not because they were mean people, but because the fact that voters were complaining about how many calls they got meant that they were making enough calls and they were getting their work done.
Yeah.
But that mentality might get you the outcome that you want in the moment, but it's not going to get you what you need overall. And then I would also say at the same time that we need to look to other disciplines of things when we think about what we're doing. We need to think about psychology, and we need to think about behavioral economics, and we need to think about those sort of, book I love that informs a lot of my thinking is called Join the Club. The ideas are really good. It's not the best written ever, which I think is why it didn't catch on such as well. But basically it says, look, you get people to topple the Yugoslav government and the Serbian Yugoslav government, and smoking amongst teenagers, and cure childhood death in India, all by and build religious local communities, all by peer pressure. And that the sort of other disciplines, and I joke in 2016 that Hillary Clinton had the best political team in the world, and Donald Trump had a bunch of C-level marketing people. But C-level marketing is actually better than A+ political organizing. I think we've gotten a little better since then, but not. Other disciplines know lots of things. If you want to get someone to, so if you want to get someone to do something small, like which soda they're going to drink, buy a TV ad. If you want someone to buy a timeshare, you need to sit them down for 2 hours and guilt them into buying a timeshare. I want to be clear, no one should buy a timeshare. I'm not advocating for the buying of timeshares, but I'm saying is if you want someone to do something big, it requires a lot of time with them. And if you have to, the timeshare people bribe their way to it, there's no law that says we can't.
What is it? Okay, so just because I'm kind of curious, I guess, because it's kind of my corner of the internet too, and you bring this up. So I understand you're talking about the hows a lot, like the structure and the function. Just curious on that idea of like cutting through the noise, because I do agree with you now that I think Scoofus was the one who made the joke that like the 18th mailer is not doing anything the 17th and the 16th, weren't able to do. And I also get all the text messages and everything else. When you say cutting through the noise, like what do you think directionally, and I understand maybe this isn't exclusively a DNC thing, but like what do you think directionally the Democratic Party could do to be more effective there?
Well, again, I'm unfortunately going to repeat myself, but finding the way to human connection. Because
like I know you mentioned the idea of what did you say, having like 1 million people who could go to 200 doors basically?
Well, there's not like, they're not this thing, they're not doors.
Sure.
That's the whole point.
You break through the window. I'm just kidding.
No, what I mean by that is they're the same 200. It is if you knock on someone's door and they're certain that they're never going to see you again, you are noise. Mm-hmm. If you knock on someone's door and you want to tell them that you're holding a barbecue, and maybe it's a Democratic Party funded barbecue, but it's a Democratic Party funded barbecue where you're not going to get, and here's the speech from the labor secretary, here's the speech from the secretary of the committee, and here's the treasurer's report, and we're going to have to let every elected official in the room talk for 10 minutes. This is a barbecue that's just a barbecue. That's how you cut through. And you can cut through when all of the time that exists in election years, the most important thing in politics is time. It's not money, it's time. And a huge part of what the Democratic Party throws away is the whole year before an election, we're not talking to people because we don't have candidate names to bring up, and we don't have things to say. We don't think we have things to say, and we don't think you want to listen, and that's expensive. But what I would say is, look, in a year, you can make a friend. In 2 years, you can make that friend and convince them that you're right about something that's important to you. We need those people to go about and make those friends. Now, do I think that you can like break a hardcore, are we going to get good logic on the team if I send him a door knocker? I don't think so. I'm not saying that you can, are we going to convince, a really deeply, biblical believing Christian that now it's a good time to vote for pro-abortion candidates? Mm-hmm. No, but there are enough sort of fence sitters that if you take 2 years, you can change someone's mind if you go about it humbly. And sort of that's how you cut through the noise. I also want to be clear that, in your online space, I think that we need to also be creating that. I'm not, no, there's no, I'm not online doesn't matter. Let's get rid of, no, online spaces are incredibly important.
Unfortunately.
Well,
because I spent a lot of time there. They're pretty brutal.
But I'm saying is online spaces are incredibly important. What I would say is that one of the, I had a conversation with one of your fellows podcasters, and what I said is that, what do we do about the fact that like the the Daily Wire right-leaning things have much bigger audiences? And the answer is because a lot of their thinking is homogeneous, and a lot of the thinking of Democrats, the 20 million people I'm talking about, they're way different from each other. Sure. They're not this, you'd go to the 20 million Republicans similarly situated. They're a Bible revival combined with, people who are angry about immigrants, taxes, and crime.
Sure.
But we need to also throw money at people creating online content. But someone, I think it was Governor O'Malley was like, we need people who are good at curating their own algorithms. And the thing about curating your own algorithms, the algorithms curate you.
Yeah, there's definitely a feedback.
You don't really curate you don't decide, I like this. You click one thing and then all of a sudden you're getting QAnon content.
Sure.
Now maybe, and so, but I think we need to throw in, I want to have the kind of resources that we can try things that don't work. And that includes, bringing more content creators into the fold and sort of, it's not like, oh, good, you have an audience, say what we want. It's, oh, good, you exist. Let's make it so that you can keep doing this work.
Yeah.
You do great work for us. You've already, I don't want to speak to your,
sure,
but you've succeeded as in this. You probably don't need a DNC check subsidy to keep you going. But
it'd be nice. No, I'm just kidding. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
What I'm saying is a lot of people, the people who are doing it out of a labor of love, who, if you have an audience of 1,000, you're doing it out of a labor of love, and $200 a month would be the difference between
a long way for sure.
Be able to do it and not do it. We need to be like, hey, we've got that. We've got you. We appreciate you. And to some degree, broadly, you have to be on the team, but we're not going to be, I would think, it's unlikely Harris would have ever, Vice President Harris, would have ever done the show because there's potentially was too much controversy around that. We have to be
definitely
somewhat
change up
not
the way
a friend. We have to be clear that like, if your values are broadly aligned, and if not my values are broadly aligned, people can disagree with us and we should go on their shows too. But if your values are broadly aligned, you get to push the envelope some, because if you are doing the work of working very hard to never offend anyone, you are guaranteed that is basically a recipe for certain desperate failure in the internet space. If your goal in the internet space is, I would like to never make anyone upset, then,
you'll probably not make anybody happy.
You're not going to make anybody happy. You're not going to succeed in the internet space unless you came in like, if you're Oprah and Oprah decided to do a podcast, she might be successful, but because she's Oprah. But I'm saying the other people offend, and so we have to be less afraid of that, particularly since, as you pointed out really well in the show, Donald Trump sat down with any lunatic with a decent sized audience. Donald Trump sat down with, and I think we would have benefited immensely from the insane promises he made that nobody knew about, up to, making by the way, this is how you keep girlfriends happy, folks, online, is you sit them down and you make them watch the Libertarian Party convention that Donald Trump spoke at, which I did. And the thing was, he made a promise to pardon a drug dealer. And I don't want to get into the particular issue of that, but I do know that the normcore American audience wouldn't have liked that, but he was able to talk to all of the, he took his ordinary Trump people and then he went out and about finding every niche
that would
group of
possibly
other,
listen to him. Yeah,
every
definitely.
other niche he went to. So like, Kennedy health nuts, libertarians, Bitcoiners, God, who knows what else. He went to every, how can I pick off little tiny pieces of people who have, because if you're on Bitcoin, you're betting on America to fail. That's the bet. You can say that you're not betting on America to fail. That's the bet. If central currencies don't work, America fails. You're betting on America to fail. Donald Trump bet on America to fail. Nobody said that because nobody understood it. And
I think I gotta.
am I getting?
Yeah,
I was on really long. I know.
No, you're good. We have to, because I have to do one final chat, and then they're gonna kick us out of the studio. But I know that you said earlier that you don't participate on X. If people are trying to find you, if they want to support, I guess you or your run for the chair, where do people find your stuff?
So basically, sign up on the website. It's paulfordnc.com. I have a Substack. It's Trench Warfare Politics on Substack. I think if you Google that, that'll work. And then we're on Blue Sky. We're on Facebook. We're on Threads. But really, just go to the website paulfordnc.com. That'll find you there. A lot of the big ideas are presented there. You click on them, then you get the Substack page for them. And so you can find the Substack through the thing. Really, also, the final plea as we're getting bounced out of the studio is I don't just want my ideas. I believe my ideas are good, but what I want is I want your ideas. I want you to think about how you would make the party better, because my whole message of the whole campaign is we're about to spend 25 days on why me, why I'm good, why I should be chair, why I should be vice chair. But this is a what we project. All of the people who are involved in this race are it's going to take all of us. So it's what are we going to do? And it's what are we going to do, the people running, but it's also what are we going to do, the 20 million of us who see that if we don't get our act together and if we don't change, we might win. This might have been the last election before no more elections. I'm praying that it's not.
Hopefully not that dramatic.
But if hopefully not that dramatic. But if, since what I said to the chair in Massachusetts was we're basically now every time we lose an election, we're playing Russian roulette with the democracy and we don't know how many bullets are in the chamber. We have to win because we can't do that anymore. Yeah. I just can't. Personally, I can't take it.
Yeah. Hopefully
I hope it's not that bad. I'm not trying to be scaremongery, but I'm just saying that's why we have to get better. Anyway,
gotcha. PaulForDNCChair.com, you said?
PaulForDNCChair.com.
Gotcha. And then Trench Warfare
Politics.
Politics for Substack.
For the Substack. And then that's also, it became the Substack because that's my book. And all the fine studio people are going to leave home with a free copy. If I'd say first 10 people who sign up on the website will get one too.
Gotcha. Cool.
So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And good luck with your race. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.